Hi, my name is Dave Howells. I'm an advertising photographer, an ex-photojournalist, and I take pictures for a living.
This is Dave Howells. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are, what you do, where you're from, and all of that fun stuff.
Dave Howells. I'm an advertising photographer now, ex-photojournalist. I like saying that. Makes me sound cooler than I am. Live in Newfoundland. I've been a pro photographer for 24 years. It started off in news, lived in the UK for a bit, worked in the States for about 16 or 17 years, and then that was all editorial, and then editorial evaporated into the ether fairly spectacularly in about 6 months straight. And then my wife, who's from here, said, that's it, I'm going home to my mother. Basically reinvented myself as an advertising photographer. There's two things that were really difficult about moving from editorial to advertising. Realizing that you can charge more, and you should charge more, and people expect you to charge more. You've got the stick here. And it's, you know what, it's not the first time I've been hit with a stick to move around. So so the first thing was like realizing that you can go into a room asking for a much higher day rate. Advertising is they're paying for your ideas. Editorial, they're not necessarily paying for your ideas. What they're actually paying for is you filling a space in a newspaper or magazine. With editorial, you're never truly free. I ended up not really caring what the house style was of magazines and newspapers. I'd just shoot whatever I wanted to shoot.
Right.
But it took me a long time to get to that point. And then now the house style is your style.
Right.
They're hiring you specifically to shoot what you want to shoot, how you shoot it.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting that you say that, because one of my questions in my thing there was, how did you develop that signature style that you have?
Honestly, it's a happy mistake. I've got a very good friend who worked in New York, who did the same as I did, worked for newspapers. He bought this softbox. I remember I got a new Canon EOS 1V, and it had this brand new technology, which of course everybody would go laugh at, and this was like 2000, I think I bought it, 2000, 2001. It had high-speed flash. I mean, literally mind-blowing, because you had to practice and practice and practice, because you're not there's no looking at the back of the camera. I loved high-speed flash. I started off on prime lenses because I couldn't afford any zooms. When I was Nikon.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Yes.
When I first started, I was on the dark side. What did all photographers use? Nikons.
Yeah, because in the film days, I guess that was
it.
it.
They had 90% of the, and I was a student when I started doing this. Second-hand Nikon cameras were battered but cheap, and then of course the prime lenses. Everybody was going to zooms. A beautiful 85-1.4 and a 135 f2, because these things I could actually buy. So when I first went to Canon, my photography sort of went downhill because I'd had this sort of signature look by accident, and then I didn't have a signature look because it was all hard news, and right. I wasn't really doing the sort of stuff I was doing. When Canon came out with their really fast L primes, I started buying those. So I always liked the no depth of field look, because nobody else seemed to be doing it at the time. I lived in New York, so I went down to B&H. I had to hand over my credit card to my wife outside because I was not.
You were going to splurge on
previously proven to be highly untrustworthy with going in. I mean, there's everything you ever want in one shop. It's absolutely incredible. So I went into the lighting system thing. I said, right, you've got a softbox that has a speed ring with a speed light, and it's a small one. And he comes out, and this is the one, sir. So I buy it, get home, and this thing is absolutely friggin' humongous. It was 2 foot by 3 foot. I'm not going back in there and embarrassed with, I've got the wrong one. So I've got this huge big 2 foot by 3 foot. Because I start using it and realizing that it gives this phenomenal look. And because in editorial I didn't have any assistants, I had a 35mm. I had the softbox that I'd hold in my hand. So I'd be literally, my arm would be here, holding this giant big softbox.
Right. And
I'd be here. Basically, this is how the technique happened. And I started doing it, and I realized that nobody was doing it like that.
Yeah.
And certainly with the high-speed sync and shooting wide open, I liked it.
Yeah.
And so did the clients.
You just kind of ran with that.
And I just ran with it. What's the great thing about editorial is it trains you to shoot extremely quick because you have no time. You have access to lots of famous people, and famous people have no time. So you have to have a stock shot that will work every single time, no matter what the lighting is. And then once you've done that, then you can do the other things you want to do. The shortest job I ever shot was 3 frames on film.
Who was that with?
Henry Kissinger.
So you shot like shitloads of famous people. Who's like your favorite top person that you shot that you're like, I can't believe I shot that person?
Favorite people aren't the famous people. Everybody has a story. There's an old dude that I shot in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I think consistently he's probably my favorite person I've shot. And when we photographed him, he was in his late 90s. He was being interviewed by the Daily Telegraph, so he had to put his suit on.
Yeah.
And he had his special hat on. The stories behind his eyes were just absolutely
amazing,
incredible. And he was just. And I said, "How have you lasted so long?" And he goes, "I get on Spot and Laugh." And I said, "Excuse me?" And he goes, "I get on Spot and Laugh." And I said, I'm sorry, I don't, terribly, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're doing. He goes, "I gave up the sport and life." And I said, "Well, what's that?" He goes, "Well, women, drinking, drugs, what have you." And he looks at me and goes, "I can see you two are still fine practitioners of the sport and life."
Oh my God.
To be that old
Amazing.
and to be that cool and to be,
Yeah.
And so there was him, but then, you're always surprised by, like George Bush. I went in there not expecting to, be very impressed or, I lived in the States when he was president, and so I, there's a pretty dim view. But I go in there, and I was pretty worried about it actually, because I was up in Newfoundland, and they had flown me down to Dallas to shoot this, and he said, "That's good news, is it's George Bush. The bad news is you have a minute." And like I said, I don't normally get freaked out. I've done this 1,000 times. Like my mother said, everybody has to be treated the same.
Right.
Everybody has to be photographed the same. It doesn't matter who they are. If you do treat everybody the same, it's amazing how people react to you. So I'm in there, and the Secret Service is there, and I've got my Chimera softbox small, and so I'm sitting there. Door cracks when the guy goes, "Come on in." And so I go in, and he's in his big office. He just leans over and goes, "Hi, I'm George." And instantly, that sort of all the pressure and stress that I had completely evaporated. He's a really genuine guy, and I don't necessarily agree with his politics, but my wife says, it's like, yeah, if you had 15 minutes, you had 15 minutes to mess it up. I can shoot pretty much any style I want.
Right.
I've got experience to be able to do that. Do people want that? No, they do not.
They want your signature look.
They want the signature look, and it's like, and that's great, because that is obviously how I see the world, and how this is how I want to shoot it.
Yeah, because you said earlier when you're shooting advertising versus editorial, you can kind of do what you want to do. But do you ever find that, probably not, because I'm sure people are just like, oh, we want your look, so do whatever.
Yeah.
But in my experience is sometimes that in advertising, shooting advertising, people try to creative direct the shit out of the creativity that you have.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. I'd say it's half and half. There's a bunch of people that I do work with. I like to call it the creative tension. Mm-hmm. I was on the shoot at the weekend. We were just laughing that basically this is Dave. He's shooting the stills. He doesn't like to be art directed at all. And this is X, the art director, who likes art directing. Learning to let go a bit, very difficult, because if you've worked by yourself continually for 20 years, that everything is on you. Right. Absolutely everything, which is great when the success happens.
Right.
And when things don't go quite right, you also have to dig yourself out of a mess. One of the things about being a photographer, one of the best piece of advice was given to me years ago, was that the earlier you get in on a job, the more input you have. Mm-hmm. Everybody has their own ideas, and it's like, everybody thinks that their dog is the best dog in the world, and they're all right. I know when something's going to work, inherently going to work well, and when things get a bit sketchy. And so if somebody says we're going to do this, it's like, that's just not going to work.
And I think that's a cool thing about being able to have that skill, because not all photographers have that skill of being able to come up with the concepts and be able to be the director. That collaborative approach in advertising is key.
It is key, and it's funny because this hat is on here to keep my ego in check. But it goes both ways. It's like, I always say this. If I think your idea is crap, I'll tell you it's crap.
Right.
And, and I'll be fairly blunt about it, to be quite honest, in a charming British accented way. But then if it's a brilliant idea, I'll probably steal it. If I'm expected to have a bit of bend, I'm expecting them to have a bit of bend.
Yeah. Let's talk about some challenges that you face with working in the job. I know we've talked about the whole raw file thing. A lot of you guys are, maybe you're just starting out or you're a professional, and you're definitely going to come across this clients asking for raw files. That's that's one of the things that my biggest pet peeve.
What I realise is two things going on here. One is a control thing. Obviously my ego is so gargantuan. Why do they want to see the raw files? I'm picking the frames that I think are best. You get sort of emotionally attached to, this was extremely difficult to light, I'm really pleased how I did this, to the, oh yeah, I just saw somebody walking down the stairs and went, bah, 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 and that's the shot. But you have to separate yourself from your own ego. I know I talk about a lot about my ego and this, that, and the other. People think I do, but I don't actually have a very big ego at all, because I'm always realizing that every shoot I've done could be better. Now, of course, is with the raw thing is it's a control thing. Is that there's also, obviously, there's lots of photographers that don't have 25 years of experience, and agencies want to see everything. There's a level of trust, but the level of trust goes both ways. Is I always say to people, is like, well, if you're going to ask for the raw files, I want to see how you process them. And so I've literally gone into ad agencies and I've stood over people like this. So you're using the clarity at 17%. You're not getting my raw files.
Well, because it's your brand.
It's my brand. You know, I did all the editing. I sent the final TIFFs, but they said, listen, could we just have the raws that you supplied just on, you know, and a couple of variations. And I said, sure. And so then they came back and said, oh yeah, we can't open any of the raw files. And I was like, well, I told you wouldn't be able to open any of the raw files because it's shot on cameras that are not, I use cameras that are not commonly used.
Right.
A lot of people ask for raws. What they're asking for is actually color corrected final pictures.
Oh, we do have a question.
Oh yeah.
Jeff's asking, when shooting so wide open with extra lighting, do you use an ND filter, or what type, how many stops? Also boxer or briefs? Boxers or briefs?
Boxers, constantly. Brought up in the tropics, I could get absolutely, you know, sort of filthy here, but it's like, I don't like to be constricted. I wear and obviously I've got socks on today with holes in them.
You did wear sandals the other day when I saw you, and it was
flip-flops.
freezing.
I live in flip-flops.
Yeah.
The straight answer is I use a lot of high-speed flash. So I don't use NDs, and I use various different types of flash. I use Profoto B1s. My most used are B2s because they're extremely lightweight and very easy to use. When I'm really close in doing my thing, I actually use speedlights, just a little old speedlight.
Adam says, what non-living famous person would you like to bring back for a photo shoot, and why? And also, how would you shoot them?
Martin Luther King. I just want to meet him. Let's say by some magic thing I managed to get Martin Luther King back, I would buy a Leica monochrome and I would shoot him on a monochrome and a Noctilux. That's what I would do. When you're shooting famous people have been shot a million times before. And so you're not just getting a picture of them, you're up against everybody else who's ever shot them. People will be looking at your pictures to see, how good are you really? So there's an extra level of pressure. I'm working harder now than I've ever worked in my life. I still spend hours on the YouTube deconstructing pictures and looking at behind the scenes things just for a little tip here and there, stuck back here, that when I do a job in a couple of months' time, it'll be like, I remember that. I'm going to do that. You know, like I always tell people, it's not about the gear. It allows you to get it. The picture should happen in your brain long before it's got to your finger, which is not the case with a lot of people. They just photograph what's in front of them. And that's great. You know, there's lots of brilliant landscape photographers who do photograph what's in front of them. There's very few good portrait photographers that photograph what's in front of them. There's lots of people who take pictures of what people look like. There's very few people who can take pictures of who they are. But that has nothing to do with cameras. That is to do with being interested in people.
Lori's asking, why did you change from Nikon? This is the big, great debate, by the way, for some of you guys who are just getting into photography and maybe you have a Canon or a Nikon. It's like, this is like a classic. It's like, are you Nikon or are you Canon?
And it's funny because, you know, my favourite cameras to use myself is still my old F3P. The end of 1993, the agency I worked for was about to do a documentary on the BBC. The autofocus on the EOS ones was better than anything else. It was an order of magnitude. There was no competition. Then when I went to this company, they gave us 2 EOS ones and I was blown away. And so I had these new Nikon cameras. And I did a job and it messed up. And it was me. I take full responsibility, but the autofocus was not as accurate as I thought it was. And so the next day I went out and bought one. For years I had a 35-350, a 17-35 as they had then, and a 100mm portrait lens. And that's why I switched. Once you're into the system, you can't change out the system. And to be honest, for all my griping about Sony cameras and Nikons and this, that and the other, if you can't get a decent shot with any camera on the market today, then you're not a very good photographer.
It doesn't matter what camera it is, what brand it is.
Doesn't matter at all.
It's all about technique.
Canon lenses have a real Leica feel to them. You want a lens that gives you a look and a feel. That's the most expensive piece of glass you can buy, that little Noctilux there. Is it the sharpest lens in the world? No, it's not. It doesn't make every picture look like it's $1 million. Yes, it does.
I'm going to give you 8 rapid fire questions.
Okay, rapid fire.
We're going to do
my version of rapid fire. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes or no? Okay.
So yes or no, or like, one word answers. Okay. Are you ready? Canon or Leica?
You have 4 seconds.
Okay.
We're both self-destruct.
Canon.
Favorite photographer?
Maritistino.
Mac or PC?
Mac. Jesus, that's a question.
Android or Apple?
Apple.
Photoshop or Lightroom?
Photoshop.
16 millimeters or 200 millimeters?
200.
F1.2 or F8?
1.2.
And mirrored or mirrorless?
Mirrored.
Awesome.
Except if it's a Leica, but that doesn't count.
One more thing I'll ask you before we go.
Okay.
Do you have any tips for people who are just starting out in photography?
Shoot. Just have a camera. I have a camera on me all day, every day. You've never seen me without a camera.
No, every time I see you, you have at least 2.
Yeah.
Did you bring 3 today?
No, just 2. Just 2 today. And number 2, don't chimp. But once you get going, don't look at the back of the camera, especially portraits. So I'm shooting portrait of Becky right now. Okay, I'm not going to actually do it. So here's me shooting you. So Becky, that's a good angle you got there. And then click. Oh yeah, that's really a brilliant looking. Oh yeah, I like that. Oh yeah, that's great. Oh yeah, blah 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 blah. You're laughing away, chatting away, and then I'm going like this, or I'm looking at you. But I'm never not. I'm looking at you in the eye constantly. I'm doing this constantly. If I went like click.
Yeah, you kind of lose that connection with
it's gone.
the person you're shooting.
You're instantly lost.
Right.
And it's like, and you're looking at me going, well, why is he looking at the camera? I thought he was a pro.
Yeah.
And I always say, if I'm going to say, listen, I'm going to take a Polaroid, click, okay, it's doing exactly what I want to do. Now we're down to business and we're just straight in. The more you shoot, the better you get.
Yeah.
So it's not, this is not rocket science. Everybody's a photographer these days. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, everybody has a camera. There's lots of photographers out there, and some of them are taking brilliant pictures, better than I'll ever take in my life, and a lot of them are taking really crap pictures. If you're not constantly part of the whole thing of relearning and learning new techniques and being on top of things, then you deserve not to do well, quite honestly. And if you shoot hard enough and work hard enough, then people will like your pictures. Occasionally they won't, and then they're wrong, obviously. But and sometimes they're right. Mm-hmm. And you have to be big enough to realize, like, you know what, that isn't the picture that they should be using. They should be using the one they're using. When it does happen, I realize, all right, I still have things to learn.
Constant learning is key.
Constant learning.
Yeah. Adam's asking, what's the biggest thing you've learned about yourself from photography?
Nobody's ever asked me that question before. I was a total failure at school. I used to drive my teachers nuts because I wasn't stupid, I just had no direction. And I realised that everybody's good at something. The reason why I do photography is like, when I look through the viewfinder, there's something in it.
Right.
It's not a blank page. I'm not coming up with nothing. That's the thing I'm amazed about illustrators and designers, how they come up with something from nothing. I'd probably be here for another 2 hours, and by the end of it, I'd be like this, telling you about Mother, and it'll be, I think there's so much in there that I couldn't necessarily. Okay, so now you know what I'm going to do now. I'm now going to be thinking. I'm going to go home. I'm going to have my mid-afternoon bath, and I just sat there like this and just be thinking. I'm very grateful for photography for giving me the opportunity to do what I've done. It is fun. At the end of the day, as my wife would say, doesn't matter how bad the day's going, you're still a photographer. Mm-hmm. How bad can it possibly be? Literally, my family or my friends from university, everybody wanted me to do a proper job, and I'm glad I didn't listen to any of them at all. It's all right to be me. Well,
thank you so much for being on. Punch it in. Awesome. Thank you. Tell them where they can find you on the internet.
Okay, you can find me 2 places. DaveHowellsPhoto.com. I'm on Instagram. Dave_Howells_photo.
Thank you for being on with us today. Appreciate it. Us, because Chris is here in the background. Say hi, Chris. Okay. So guys, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get notified when we post new videos. Bomb the lens. Bomb the lens.
PBS 15 years ago, there was this crazy guy called Harv T. Eckert or something like that. And he had this thing where he said, there's 2 things that you should do. Number 1 is just do it. And the second thing was ready, fire, aim. Because if you don't fire, you don't get going on the road, you don't know where you're going to end up. But if you don't start on the road, you're never going to get there.